It could have been our fourth, but it's our third. As you know, the Forks of Cypress got canceled last week because of rain, but we've rescheduled it for May 14th. Just so you know, you can check our website out. But it's May 14th at the Forks of Cypress. Today is Northport and Seminary Streets. Next week is UNA campus. That's right, and we'll be meeting right in front of the lion habitat over there. So, but anyway, just want to welcome you here. And isn't he a wonderful man? I just so appreciate Mr. Warren. That's the word I was looking for. Wonderful.
Tell my wife that. Tell my wife that, would you please?
Yeah. So anyway, take it away, Philip. Thank you.
Okay, let me get up here. I think it would be better if all of us will gather out here, perhaps. I'd like to start, as a group first and give you some information for about 10 or 12 minutes. I know old school teachers say 10 or 12 minutes and it ends up being 3 hours, right, Billy? No, I promise you. For those of you who've not been on a tour with me before, I promise that we keep our tour within an hour and 10 minutes, okay? I know that after that, people zone out. They've had enough of it. As I laugh and tell other folks, even if you're on a trip to Europe, after a while you say, if this is Thursday, it must be Belgium, or not another castle. So even at that, you have to have an end, right? So enough filibustering, let's get on. The city of Florence has a wonderful, wonderful history, and I think you know that, or at least suspect it is the reason you're here today. I want to try to share some information that much of it I'm sure you will know, others I hope will be new to you. This area, came very close to being part of Georgia. Did you know that? Georgia was the last of the 13 colonies founded, and the governor of Georgia and other officials there had great designs. They were deciding that Georgia's boundary, its western boundary, was going to be, are you ready for this? The Mississippi River. Got it? So it would then extend all the way across what is now Alabama and what is now Mississippi, all the way to the river. Well, the Native Americans said, not so fast. They went so far in 1785 as to send a group, I'm talking about, when I say they, I'm talking about the governor and his henchmen, sent a group over here to design a county. The way it was designed, it would cut across all of North Alabama and all of northern Mississippi. Within just a few weeks, they had succeeded in scaring away those Georgians, and that was enough of that. But here's the really cool thing as far as I'm concerned, folks. To be in a planned town on the frontier is pretty amazing. But our town was actually planned from the beginning. Most towns, just kind of grow up. Later on, wherever the cotton gin was, a town would grow up around it, or much later than that, wherever the train stopped, a town would grow up around it. But ours was planned from the very beginning. Andrew Jackson had succeeded in stealing millions of acres from the Native Americans. Yes, I will repeat that, stealing millions of acres. And so at that point, then all of this became federal property. So, a group of guys, I'd like to tell you that Florence was founded as a philanthropic kind of thing, but no, it was a for-profit venture. A group of 7 guys got together, and it was not philanthropic. They wanted a good return on their money, right? So they set about immediately to lay out the town. They couldn't do it themselves, so one of them was, one of the 7, John Coffey, was one of the planners, but there were 3 guys who were designated to lay out the town. John Coffey was one of them. A guy named Hunter Peel, W-L. Are you old enough to hear somebody say W-E? I say that. Had skills, having been trained in Italy in surveying and all of that other guys did not have. So these 3 guys set about to lay out the town, and then to divide it into lots so they could sell the lots and get a good return on their money. The sales began on March the 12th of 1818 over in Huntsville. Huntsville's about 10 years older than Florence. There wasn't a Florence, so they couldn't have the auction here. They had it over there. So they had the first land sale on March the 12th, and then another one in July. And really over a period of about 7 years, they continued to have sales in the river. But if you're going to lay out of town, you got to sacrifice a few of those trees, right? So they set about to do that. Now, with that having been said, let's get the map here circulated. If I can get some help, please. I'll get some. Thank you. This is that awkward time when teachers are distributing things in a classroom, and they know that the kids are going to quit listening to them and start looking at the paper they got in their hands, and the teacher is trying desperately to keep their attention. So I'm going to keep talking. This has to be up the top right corner, and in very fancy script. Now there's plenty. No, you don't have to share. I've got plenty of them. So if you didn't get one, let me know that. Unless you want to. Oh, there we go. Just get those right there. Okay. In very fancy script, it says a plan of the town of Florence and the lands adjacent belonging to the Cypress Land Company, copied from the original by F. That's a fancy F period. Stands for Ferdinand Sononer. He's the Italian guy that I mentioned a few minutes ago. I don't really think his name was Ferdinand Sononer. I think his name was Sonona. That's much more Italian, right? I think, as it happens in the South, if your name is Leona, won't be long till you're Leona, right? So, so I think Ferdinand.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But because I've actually seen it spelled that way in a very old document. But he was, by the way, the city clerk in Florence in the 1840s, and I found his signature in a ledger downtown, and it is signed Ferdinand Sononer. Maybe he just gave in to it after a while. You can't fight it; just becomes Sononer. Who cares? Anyway, enough of that. And then it says copied from the original by Ferdinand Sononer. And if you might not be able to read those numbers at the bottom of that, that's 1852. We do not have the original 1818 map. At some point, it was burned when it was stored in a building downtown. But along the way, the city alderman, that's what the city council was called in those days, the city alderman contacted Sononer, who still lived in Florence, by the way. His house was on the southeast corner of Wood Avenue and Tuscaloosa Street. Yeah, where the library is now, on the corner, not that whole big lot. Anyway, he still lived here, and he in fact did live here until 1858 when he moved to Memphis. But they called him in and said, this map has become old and frayed and we need a new one. So they paid him, according to the city document, they paid him the grand sum of $25 to redraw the map that he had drawn in 1818. We don't, as I said, we don't have the 1818, but I'm pleased to tell you that we do have the original 1852 map. It is framed and is in a vault in a building downtown. So we're really pleased that we have that one at least. We were able to get this map copied from that original 1852. So what you have in your hand is an authentic copy. That sounds like a crazy word, doesn't it? Anyway, a copy from the authentic original. Okay, that's better. All right. Now, I want you to notice you will do better. Yeah, right. There we go. If you will turn your map for a minute, turn your map this way so that the legend is in the top left corner. Okay, and look at the streets, the northwest streets, starting at Locust. Do you see what I'm talking about? The northwest streets. Now, north is not north. Okay, so there cedar, pine. What do you hear? Trees. But not just any tree. They are indigenous trees. They are trees in Alabama. And it goes on pine and oak and magnolia and walnut and so on. Now, not all of them, though. There are 3 of them that are not named for trees, and that's significant. So let me tell you a little bit about that. One of them is named Court Street. Of course, that's where the courthouse was from the very beginning. So they named it Court Street from the beginning. One is named Seminary. See it just a block over from Court. Seminary was so named because the planters. Can y'all hear me with my back?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't usually have any trouble. I can be heard to Sheffield. I'm an old the teacher, right? But now I lost my train of thought. Seminary, thank you. Need all the help I can get, obviously. Seminary Street. Eventually, in 1847, there was a college there. Okay, it was called the Florence Female College. In 1855, 8 years later, it was deeded over to the Presbyterian Church, so it became the Florence Female Synodical College. If you're Presbyterian, you know that word synod is part of your vocabulary. Florence Female Synodical College. So look at the map with me, please. Look on the, turn it up so that you can see, it's regular way. Look at the very top, the grid in the middle. That is what is now downtown Florence, of course. At the top of that grid, running east and west, right almost in the middle of it, each one of those blocks, by the way, is a city block, obviously. Right in the center is a block that is labeled Public Walk. Raise your hand if you see that. Again, my old school teacher kicks in here, okay? I don't want to go too fast. Everybody see Public Walk in that little block? All right? We still have that public walk from the very beginning. What do we call it now? Wilson Park. Yes, thank you very much. Now get this, folks. This is another one of those really unusual things about a planned town on the frontier. Remember I said they had trees in the river? But I credit Sonona having his classical training. He said this town will always need green space. The human soul, the human spirit cannot survive on concrete and asphalt. It's got to have green space, right? Now, that's all he had to work with at that moment was green space. But he was forward enough looking that he said, we've got to. And now, of course, Wilson Park is a crown jewel of our town, especially that beautiful fountain and all of that. But now look just below that same block, and you'll see another block that doesn't have any writing on it, but it's got a dotted line and then a heavy black thing in the middle. Okay? What is there? The post office. Yeah, the post office. But what was there in 1847 was that Florence Female College, Florence Female Synodical College. Perhaps you have seen pictures of that college. We had 3 female colleges in this town. A little town on the frontier. That doesn't make much sense, really, does it, knowing history? But we can be so proud of it now. This college existed from 1847 to 1892. There was another school called the Baptist Women's University. You go out Wood Avenue, it becomes Cloverdale Road, Seymour Street, turn left, go all the way down to the end of Seymour where that big water tank, that old water tank is. That's where the Baptist Women's University was, and it burned actually in 1912, or would have continued. Then there, if you go out Highway 72 east to where Bailey Springs Road, where it intersects with Highway 72, go all the way down to the end of Bailey Springs Road, and there was the Bailey Springs University for Women. I just find that amazing, really, don't you? A small town like this. Now, of course, next week I'll be, for the first time, directing the tour on this campus, and of course, it was established in 1855 and was co-ed, but anyway, there were 3 female colleges. All right, so the public walk, I'll tell you a couple of other things, and then I will hush so we can walk. You didn't come to hear me blab, right? Look down at the bottom at the river, right on the edge of the river, near the left-hand side, near the river. You'll see around just a circle there, a small circle. See that? And it is labeled what? Mound. Right. I find that so fascinating and really so wonderful that even in 1818, these planners knew that there was some significance to that beautiful Indian mound. Over the years, sadly, it's not always had the respect that we now have for it. It was actually farmed, used as farm place for a period of time. There was even one point when the city leaders considered just digging it out and using it for field dirt. Anyway, thank goodness none of that happened, and the Dabney family gave it to the city because it was privately owned all these years. Gave it to the city in 1945, and nothing's going to happen to it now. But anyway, I think it's interesting that they saw the significance of that mound and its connection to our wonderful history. The final thing is, unless you have a question, is look again at the bottom of the mound, and you see, I'm an old history and English teacher, but the only word I can think of is squiggly. Okay, you'll see a squiggly road that goes up the map and then goes all the way around the grid back down again to the river, and it's labeled Circular Road. Everybody see that? These guys, I'm talking about John Coffey and Hunter Peel and Ferdinand Sonona. These guys knew that at some point there would be too many buggies and wagons and whatever in downtown in this grid. So they needed to get the traffic flowing around. Okay. Well, about 40 years ago, we built another circular road. We call it Cox Creek Parkway. Yeah. But guess what? Because we live in an era, not just Florence, we live in an era when most towns survive on sales tax revenue, right? So what did we do to Cox Creek Parkway that was designed to get traffic around? We put in 42 Walmarts, 37 traffic lights, about 102 fast food restaurants, and whatever. When I have teenagers on a tour, I tell them that story, and I say, I don't know, man, it's not going to happen in my lifetime, but yours, we'll probably build another one out near the Show Creek, and it'll go around. Guess what we'll do? 42 Walmarts, 100. Now, I am not being critical of Florence at all. We live in an era, it happens in every town across the country. We live in an era when sales tax is the driving thing for local economy. On that map, you'll see where those streets are, Locust and Cypress and so on. One of them is Court, one Seminary. Another one is labeled Market Street. Okay, Market Street is now Wood Avenue, of course. But this is again the forward-looking nature of those three guys. I just can't compliment them enough. They knew, because we were such an agrarian world, of course, in 1818. They knew that the farmers would need a farm-to-market road. So they designed Market Street to be that road. Well, guess what? If you're on Wood Avenue, say you're right at the public library on Wood Avenue, and you're going north, you get through that strange intersection called 7 Point, get on beyond that a little bit, and it becomes Cloverdale Road, right? And then you hit the city limits, and it becomes Highway 157, right? Goes all the way to Cypress End, Tennessee, and then you got to stop and turn right or left because it dead ends there. But think about it, folks. All those farms along that long path, they might not, be right up against it, but they were close enough they could bring to that road, and they had a farm-to-market road. They would bring their produce into town, set up an impromptu farmers market around Wilson Park on the edges there, and it was to their benefit and to the benefit of the people in town. Another, in my way of thinking, another mark of genius that I love to tell this part. Of course, those guys had no notion that this would happen. But when you leave Interstate 65 in Coleman and get on Highway 157 and head to Florence, you follow that, and it eventually becomes Wood Avenue. How about that? And it goes in, as I said, all the way up to Cypress End. Now, those guys didn't know they were connecting all the way to an interstate when they did this, but I just find it really kind of amusing, actually, that has turned out that way. Okay. So, in those days, you couldn't just go down to the city council and ask for a variance. He had to actually appear before the state legislature to get permission to bid in this street. And so he did, and the legislator said, well, if you will build a house of substantial quality, we will grant it. Well, obviously, he did build a house of substantial quality. This house has so much history just surrounding it. It is a beautiful example of Greek revival, and the columns are ionic, as you know. When I have kids on the tour, I give them a little architecture lesson and ask them if they know the names of these columns. They usually don't, because they're so, their tongue is tied when they're out here, whatever. Anyway, but the house was later owned by Governor Emmett O'Neill. He grew up in the house across the street. We will get to that house in a little bit. His father, Edward Asbury O'Neill, was a mayor of Florence, later was an officer in the Confederate Army, and was later governor of Alabama, lived over there, right? But Emmett, of course, and his siblings grew up there. So then Emmett followed his father, 15 or 20 years later, as governor as well. This house was built in 1843. Now, actually, there was a house ahead of it that burned, but 1843. A fellow by the name of John Simpson was brought to Florence by James Jackson out at the Forks of Cypress. If you go on that tour with Harry Wallace on May 14th, or if you've been with him before, he'll talk a great deal about James Jackson. But the reason I bring him up here is that, of course, he's the one who built the Forks of Cypress, that plantation house. But the reason I bring him up here is because he brought this John Simpson to Florence. In the 1840s, can you hear me okay in the back? Yes? Okay. In the 1840s, Edward Asbury O'Neill and his wife Olivia Moore O'Neill, they were living in Huntsville at the time, and they were visiting over here, and this house was in construction, and Olivia said, I'll have that house one day. Well, oh guys, if Mama wants a house, then Mama is going, no, I'm kidding. Anyway, eventually they did, in fact, own the house in the 1850s. What I like to tell young people, I say to them, okay, look at these columns. They are not just round columns. What is this architectural term? Well, they don't usually know, but the word is fluted, right? This is fluted columns. When Mrs. O'Neill was here and her husband was away in the war, she was here with children. And there was never a major Civil War battle in Florence, but there were many skirmishes. So we have copies of letters that she and he wrote back and forth. And she says to him at one point that she was so terrified that she asked the Irvins, remember the Irvins at that house over there, the Kobe Hall? She asked the Irvins if she could bring the children over there and stay in the basement until the skirmishes were passed. Now the basement over there, by the way, it's brick floors, very nice. But anyway, of course they agreed. But I like to tell that kind of story because to me it puts a face on that awful thing when we were fighting each other for God's sake. And she was living here by herself with little children to take care of. And you can imagine, at one point, by the way, she did evacuate and went over and lived in Russellville for a while to get away from it. Question? This is our last stop, and want to talk about, first of all, about two Sears Roebuck houses, okay? You may or may not be aware that, well, of course you do know that Sears Roebuck was the originator of the whole catalog sales idea. And literally, there was a time when you could order anything, pretty much anything from Sears Roebuck, including houses, all right? So, these two houses, this one right here and that one. Now, not this one on the far left, but these next two, okay? Those two houses were both ordered from Sears Roebuck. This is kind of the forerunner of what we now call prefab houses, okay? These are substantially more than the current use of the term prefab house, obviously, but nonetheless, these were prefab houses. What you do, you take a Sears catalog, go to the housing section, depending on how much money you had to spend or wanted to spend, then there were various styles to choose from. So you make that decision, and then you'd place your order. You'd make arrangements in the meantime for a contractor with a flatbed truck to meet the train on a given day and bring those prefab materials to the building site. That sounds almost like a pipe dream, doesn't it? But really is very true. We don't know exactly the origin of these two houses. We have some indication that they were both bought by the same family for other family members. But we don't know that for a fact yet, so we don't say that, we don't present it as fact. But we do know it was in the early 1920s, and you might be saying, well, what did a house like that cost in the 1920s? Probably each one of them, I would say, maybe around $8,000 or $9,000. Now today they're about $350,000 or more, obviously, because they are part of this historic district that runs along the street too. And I've been through that house. I want to tell you that evidently Sears Roebuck had some really fine designers on staff. That house is so well appointed throughout. There's not a wasted space of any kind. Everything is very, very well planned. I mean, it is really just a fine house. And I'm sure the other one is as well. I just have never been inside it. But I do know a quick story, but I don't know which of the two houses that I'm really talking about. But Marjorie Norton, who has since died, told me once that she and her family lived in one of these two houses. At that point, when these houses were first constructed, they were identical at the front. And she said her mother got tired of people driving in the wrong driveway when they had come to see her. So she had brought in a contractor and changed the front of the house so that it wouldn't look like a cookie cutter. So again, I don't know which house that was, but I do know it, one of the two, and I will find out eventually. Since I can't ask Marjorie, I'll find out eventually which one it was. But nonetheless, Sears Roebuck houses. Again, there were various styles. There used to be another Sears Roebuck house in town that I knew of at least, and it was in Whedon Heights. You go out Highway 72, Huntsville Road, into Whedon Heights, and where the Baptist church is there on the corner of Lee Highway. Across the street, across that Broadway street, there was a Sears Roebuck house there. It was a smaller house, but had beautiful exterior design to it. And I was out there recently. I was just checking, because I do that occasionally because my old history background won't let me do it. Otherwise, the house is gone. It has been demolished at some point. And by the way, Sears Roebuck was not the only company that did the prefab. There's a house on Wood Avenue that was from the Aladdin Company in Michigan. If you're at the corner of Tuscaloosa and Wood and Kennedy Douglas Art Center's on the corner, right? Coming north on Wood Avenue, not the first house, but the second one on the left is a prefab house done by the Aladdin Company. So there were, and by the way, Aladdin Company was still in business until not more than 20 or 30 years ago. But of course, Sears Roebuck stopped doing that many years ago. Yes, ma'am.
I just have noticed on some of the homes, the fleur-de-lis plaque. What
Yes.
is that?
That is done locally by an organization called Heritage Preservation, Inc.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
I figured it had something to do with,
Yeah,
Okay.
it shows that it's part of the. I mean, people have to buy those. They're
Okay.
not just distributed, but that's to indicate it's a historic nature. Yeah, it has the name of the house and the year of construction on it.
Thanks.
Anybody else?